officers working different shifts and taking their fingerprints. So there was a verbal extension that we can carry on during the year with it. And at the end of February and March, Colonel du Plessis then took all the fingerprints that was already submitted, handed it over to the Provincial Police Commissioner's office, and they started to analyze it. In the South African police side, it took a long time. It was like 4 to 5 months to take it, but it was distributed to different criminal record centres like Soweto, Johannesburg, Tshwane, and East Rand, because of the huge volume that came in. And then it started to trickle back, and eventually, once it started coming back, one of my sections, Colonel van Rooyen, which is the human resource liaison person, his section was then tasked to scan and capture the returns, which is the SAP 69 forms, which is the criminal records. It will state on the front page either illicit activity recorded or no illicit activity recorded. If it says no illicit activity recorded, then there's no record of SAPS looking for you or having any record of you. And if there's illicit activity recorded, there will be a SAP 69, which is the actual record, will then be attached to the back of that. So Colonel van Rooyen and his section started to capture all of these returns as it is. Eventually there was more than 3,700 in total. I don't have the exact figure, but I've got a spreadsheet with the actual names on it that was submitted to HR. And in this process, when we got to a stage where it's a year later now, we're supposed to start the next session of vetting again, but we haven't even concluded the first session again. And I was then tasked by Chief Mappier to give feedback on this specific status. Where in the project are we? Because we are capturing, my section is capturing it. I then prepared a feedback where I presented and I started. We were at a meeting which we call PEXCO inside. It's Police Executive Committee. It's the Chief of Police with his deputy chiefs and the Head of Internal Affairs that is together. And at this meeting where we were present, the Chief was chairing and I was presenting the feedback of this or where we are. The moment I started to give feedback, Brigadier Makonasi was sitting right opposite me. And he started to scream with even spit and froth that comes out of his mouth at me, where he was screaming extremely disrespectful towards me, screaming that he doesn't have a criminal record, and I'm saying he's got a criminal record. And I said to him, but I'm not saying he's got a criminal record. I'm giving feedback on the status of the fingerprints. What I do say is that your section didn't provide the fingerprints and they refused to provide the fingerprints. I'm not saying you have a criminal record. And he just kept on screaming at me in front of all of us in the meeting. He physically took his phone out and he started phoning. And he speaks, you can clearly hear, he speaks to the city manager, Imogen Mashazi. And he puts the phone down and he says, the city manager says this process will stop immediately. And he turned around and he walked out in an extremely disrespectful manner. Closed the door. We were all still shocked that a senior officer can actually even act in this manner. And the Chief of Police, Commissioner Mappier, then calmed us all down and says, stop, don't discuss further anything here. He will go and speak to the city manager afterwards and he will calm everything down. We must just carry on doing our work. And from that meeting then, the very next day, I received an email from Kasheka, who is the HOD of HR, wherein she stated that the process and we must submit everything to them. At that stage, I have already prepared what we call a council item. It is a draft item that we can report to council. Everything is already in the item, the wording, the background, the discussion, up to resolutions even, but it's still in the draft form. It states at the top draft as well. Attach this list of officers with a graph of what the crimes are, what the officers are accused of, just redacting their names, and the spreadsheet itself has been encrypted with a password that no one can really open it if they do see it. And we submitted that as a proposal to say, we from a Metro Police side thinks that HR must deal with these officers in the following manner. And the proposal that we in the draft made is that the officers must be offered the chance to provide proof that they have been expunged, because there is in law an expungement process, and it's possible that they've been expunged and the certificates has not been submitted, that we make sure that it's a proper process, so that every officer be given an opportunity. So we propose, because we know how long the process takes in the Justice Department, is to give them a period of 6 months, provide proof of expungement, and if you do not have proof of expungement, that we then start the initial proceedings at the end to either dismiss or to take disciplinary actions against the officers who've got criminal records. So that day, a meeting was then set up with HR. However, it was postponed at the last minute to the next day, and we then met at Kasheka's boardroom in Germiston.
Well, before you continue, Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to take you back to